I'm Mandy McLeod. Welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. In this week's show, author of The Coming Famine, Professor Julian Cribb believes New Zealand is ideally placed to position itself as an agricultural knowledge exporter in the face of the looming food crises. Is this how we really see ourselves? Fonterra will never process 100% of its own milk, says Finance Minister Bill English. But how many other companies are expected to share with their competitors? Labor wants tax to change farmer behaviour. How would the controversial capital gains tax really work in New Zealand for agribusiness? Joining me today is Jim Cotman and Malcolm Lumsden, both dairy farmers and industry leaders. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
Good to have you both here, safe and sound, especially you, Malcolm.
Oh, yes, yes.
Now, over the past decade, the demand for food has increased, and we've seen a supply lapse due to the demand for land for non-agricultural purposes. And Professor Cribb says that New Zealand can capitalise on its intellectual riches to become the Silicon Valley of agricultural knowledge. Jim, what do you think about this concept?
Yeah, I think it's a neat challenge, and I read some of the information that Julian's put together. Also had a presentation from him from last December, so looked at what he was talking about in terms of the need for food, etc. The challenge to us, though, I think, is to make sure that we don't go past our base, our commodity base, too quickly. So in other words, invest in what we're good at. It's called commodity, but it's actually added value product that we do provide, and then let's lever off that. There is a caveat around that, Mandy. The caveat is if we start talking about Silicon Valley and good information going wider, that we do it as a New Zealand corporation and not just a one-off, because I think people such as yourselves or Malcolm's could definitely go offshore and sell that information. Where does New Zealand actually make a buck out of that?
Yeah, it's just very much a single entity, isn't it? Malcolm, what do you think? There's any danger of us potentially becoming like Ireland and really buying into?
Well, I think we're good. What we're good at is low-cost production of food. And once we go outside that, I think we're into trouble. The challenges that we face are continuing to get that product to the market. There's going to be high energy costs and other things. So we don't want to extend our farming to get into a high-cost, energy cost dependent structure. We've got to maintain the basis and do it well.
I'm going to challenge you on that, Malcolm. Do you really think that, for the first, that New Zealand is low cost, especially when you put into account our reliance on fertiliser and oil, both of which have to be brought in? And is our government doing enough to minimise our dependence or our reliance on both diesel, and I should say oil and fertiliser?
Yeah, that's important. We've got to recognise that. What really irks me is that we've got resources around this country, and we've got people in this country who say we'd rather pillage the rest of the world for our oil and our other resources than use our own and make a contribution to the global resource use. I think that's the challenge, but we've got to be very mindful. We do have the poorest soils in the world. And we need fertiliser to make them what they are, and we should never go past that base. So we do face challenges.
Jim, do you think we require a paradigm shift in our own country around this exportation of services versus products?
Look, I think we're capable of doing it, but I go back to my first point. We don't want to move past what we're good at, and the R&D should go into making sure we cement that in. And you raised it about the Ireland thing. We don't really want to move to where Ireland went and forgot about their basic production mechanisms, which we're really good at. So, but we have some really neat technology that is being developed on farm. And with some more R&D supporting that, some of that technology will be needed around the world in terms of what Julian's talking about, for instance, the water shortage, good ways of using water more efficiently. I see a lot of those examples being out on farm now. New technology, cell phone technology where you can dial in, or PLCs that are put in the water systems.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating argument. I mean, I guess I'm still yet to be convinced that if I look at New Zealand's productive capacity, I see it actually coming more from less rather than, you know, I still think that the average farmer can increase their own productivity first, and we need a lot of research and to go into that.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, better water use efficiently and using our fertilisers perhaps more efficiently rather than having helicopters fly nitrogen on during our wet weather, which I'm sure some of us saw.
But the danger is that agriculture is being smothered by bureaucracy.
Yes.
And the important thing for New Zealand is to let the experts do what they've done best and look at the increases in productivity in the agricultural sector. It's just been second to none. Now we've got a whole lot of people who believe they know better and want to control us. And that's the danger for us. If we allow that to happen, our innovation is going to get smothered and we'll continue to be a third world country.
Now, Malcolm, on that point, capital gains tax.
Ooh.
What do you think? What do you really think?
Well, it's the politics of envy. Phil Goff has disenfranchised himself for ever being a leader of this country. If you're going to be a leader of this country, you've got to be a leader of the whole population. You've got to represent the whole population. And it's absolutely scandalous what he's done in terms of misrepresenting the facts. It reeks of Trevor Mallard and his nastiness behind the whole thing. I am absolutely fed up with the whole nonsense. I mean, to say we pay a huge amount in carbon tax. We use $90 worth of power in the cow shed alone a day and we pay carbon tax on that. Yet he says we're not paying our fair share. He is just completely misrepresenting the sector. It's nasty politics, it's divisive politics, it's not the politics that this country wants to get forward.
So I'm going to take that a step aside and bring in what the National Minister, Bill English, said around the Dairy Industry Restructure Act, and that Fonterra is never going to be able to process 100% of its own milk. Now, we're lambasting Labor for what they're doing. Do you think National needs to be held accountable for what?
They're plonkers, and that's the only word you can use. You know, to suggest that I, as a shareholder of the most successful company in New Zealand, that is benefiting all New Zealanders, that I have to supply product to someone else who's going to export against me. As a shareholder of Fonterra, I have no difficulty in supplying milk to someone who's going to sell it on the local market. But why should I sell it to an overseas company who's then selling it in the name as New Zealand milk, who then, when the quality control goes wrong, will put up their hand and say, but we got it from Fonterra?
Jim, what do you think on this? How do you think it works? And do you think there's any leg in this that applies to the call for a transparent milk price?
Yeah, I'm sure that's what's behind it, so that competitors can see exactly what they can buy it at. But I agree with Malcolm. Absolutely, clearly, there's no argument with allowing competition in the internal market to supply New Zealanders, and we would be behind that as the largest company in New Zealand is to make sure that that's a transparent market and that they do get milk products at the right price. But in terms of then using that for overseas product,
which is a directly competitive...
which everything else is competitive in the world, and yet we're being asked to have our legs tied, I guess.
But it's not only that. It costs us 10 cents a kilogram as suppliers to do that. I mean, to say we've had to close down factories because we haven't got enough milk to run them because we're required by law to supply milk to our competitors. How is that efficient? Well, I know of a case where a factory was dumping milk onto pasture because it couldn't process it all, but it had to dump the Fonterra milk onto pasture to maintain its entitlement for the rest of the year. Let Bill English explain that to me as to how that's in the interest of New Zealand. It's not. And I think that Bill English is completely out of his tree on this, and he needs to re-examine where his philosophies are. As a sheep farmer, if he was told he had to send some of his lamb to a competitor, I'll bet he'd have been the first to complain.
Well, very straight words from you. Malcolm, thank you very much. Coming up after the break, with one of the wettest winters on record, how are farmers in the Upper North Island coping as they head into their busiest time of calving and lambing? And Fonterra gets a new boss. After 10 years of consolidation at Fonterra, what is expected for the new chief? America's agricultural minister has launched a new dairy farm initiative worth more than $1 million to help farmers evaluate production techniques and to identify ways to improve management. Do we need a similar tool here in New Zealand? All this after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Theo Spearings from Holland, the new boss of Fonterra, will have big boots to fill when current CEO Andrew Ferrier leaves the co-op in September. Jim, what do you think the shareholders of Fonterra are going to expect of their new boss?
Quite a lot, obviously. He's got, as you say, he's got big boots to fill, given the success that Andrew's had. I think the first thing we'll be looking for, though, is that he reinforces the cooperative values. And I think having come through the background that he has, we will see a reinforcement of that. But the reinforcement is not just back to New Zealand farmers, but to reinforce those values to New Zealand so that we can continue to farm and operate the company. I guess, Mandy, the point Malcolm was making earlier, there's 10,000 odd, we are odd, by the way.
Far be it from me to agree or disagree.
I was talking about Malcolm, actually. The 10,000 farmers who own and operate Fonterra. They invest in their farms, they invest in Fonterra, they invest in the marketing organisation to sell the product overseas, and it's those farming families that make up the cooperative that are part of New Zealand. And that's what Fonterra is, and I'm hoping that with that background that he'll be able to espouse that loud and clear to New Zealand, so they are proud of what our forebears, I guess, have put in place for us.
It's a little bit lacking in that pride at the moment, isn't there?
Not in my department.
Well, no, Malcolm, not in your department.
I'm hugely proud of Fonterra.
But do you think that everyone is?
No. But we've got reason to be proud.
We do.
I had an American visitor here recently who was sent to me by the chief executive. And I spent some time explaining to him that I was one of the 10,000 proud shareholders of Fonterra, that we actually owned the company, that unlike any other shareholding I've ever held, I can pick the cell phone out of my pocket and ring the chairman or the chief executive and have a discussion with them. Where else can you do that? We've really got a wonderful company in Fonterra, and we should be proud of it.
And the other thing, I guess, that we're really looking from is he has strengths in strategic development, strategic planning. That's something that he needs to take the shareholders along and take us along with it. We hear about our moves into China and into Asia, and that's certainly where the markets are going to be. He needs to take us along for the ride and make sure he explains the strategy of how we're going to get there and steps along the way. So yeah, we're looking forward to a change, I guess.
Do you think that one of the things that he seems to have been singled out for as having done really successfully was the merger between Dutch co-op Friesland and Campina, and is that something that, as a stretch, he may be looking at for some mergers with Fonterra, or is that just something that the media have grabbed onto?
I think his first priority is to do as his predecessor did, and that was get to understand his shareholders. Yep. And Andrew Ferrier did that second to none. He listened to the farmers. After that, what else follows? But I think the farmers are going to be a little bit sceptical when if he starts off on the first dance talking about mergers and things like that, because our first principle in New Zealand is we've got to re-establish ourselves as part of this community, given all the knocks we're taking.
I couldn't agree more.
But in terms, if you stretch the imagination of what a merger really is, some of the work they've just started doing with discussions with the meat industry, for example, in terms of shipping arrangements. Now, I could see us not merging, but having decent joint ventures with the rest of New Zealand exporters, working together on making the shipping arrangements, the marketing arrangements, the whole 9 yards, a tidier package. Heavy's got the strengths to do that and the abilities through this mergers that he's had there. Maybe that's something that we'll see coming about.
Oh, I just think we should just take over the whole meat industry in New Zealand and wrap it all up and just get on with it.
Oh boy.
What we could do with it.
Yeah, we could. Now, dairy stewardship. The toolkits have been currently piloted in the US, aimed at establishing on-farm sustainability indicators. It's a science-based tool that's going to help identify and measure practices that reduce costs and environmental impacts. Jim, do we need something similar here, and do we have enough science to roll it out?
Well, I think we actually already have something here, and it's just it hasn't been packaged up enough to say exactly what the stewardship package is. Mandy, we see it all throughout New Zealand and demonstrated by a lot of farmers across the sector, not just the dairy industry, of farmers that understand the stewardship ethics they need to put to apply. Some aren't perhaps backed with science, but the results show that they must mean something. So I think we could certainly develop from some of that, and I've seen a lot of it, I guess, through. I'm fortunate to be involved in the New Zealand Farm Environment Award Trust. Yes. And I travel around New Zealand and seeing a number of top farmers who understand these things and are probably looking for a little bit of science backup and sort of, hey, look, we've done this, we know it works, how do we explain it? And I think that's more of where the Stewardship Council directive in the US is coming from. We need to be able to explain it to people.
Malcolm, do you think we need a forum for farmers to tell their stewardship story? You know, we've got the Farm Environment Awards and we see farmers that win that get the opportunity. But as Jim just said, there's a lot of farmers out there doing some really amazing things. Do you think that we've got currently a forum or a framework for those people to come in and do that?
Well, we don't. We do it ourselves. We encourage schools to come in and bring the children in, and we try and do it at a lower level. Because, you know, the old story, show me the boy and I'll show you the man. If we can get the school children to understand what agriculture is, that's fine. My neatest trick is when they're leaving, they're going to McDonald's, and I challenge them to tell me what in a McDonald's burger doesn't come from a farm. And that's a real awakening for them because they work through the process, and one of the comics will say, oh yeah, what about the salt, mister? I say, well, we've got a salt farm down in Blenheim, so you stretch the truth a wee bit. But
that's not like you, Malcolm.
That's not too much.
But getting into the minds of the children that their food doesn't come from the shelf of the supermarket, it comes from a farm, is important. I think in terms of the general population, we've got this Phil Goff thing and the prejudice that builds up. We've got the Greens and the prejudice they build up. They continue to bite the hand that feeds them. And until we can stop that sort of nonsense going on, they're not going to recognise what a wonderful country they live in and what a wonderful world-class industry they've got supporting their standard of living.
I think there is a hairy, audacious plan that could be put in place around that in terms of creating a forum, and we already have the nucleus of it, and as we talked about the balance awards and the trust, there's a number of parties there. Our major exporters are already in that tent. Now, it doesn't take too much thinking to say perhaps form a separate company, a separate business that's actually aimed at providing this information and working on the same page. And I think that's, God, it's frustrating in New Zealand. We're such a neat country, but a small country, and we all want to do it different ways ourselves.
And I mean, I think, Malcolm, you said it earlier with Fonterra about us being able to share, or farmers being able to share their story and have like a shared community, which I guess I don't really see at the moment. We've got this gap between urban and rural.
That's right.
And there are some, you know, fingerlings that have gone across, but there doesn't seem to be a really concerted effort by agriculture in any sense of the, you know, whether it's, you know, dairy, sheep and beef, horticulture, whatever. And I just can't help but feel we need to have more, like you're doing it with school kids, fantastic. But how do we make those fingerlings actually solid links?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And I think that like Neil Bader and myself and other good farmers around the country who do their best to influence the local one, that's piecemeal. We need something, and I agree with Jim where he comes from. I think Fonterra itself could do more. I've tried to work with Fonterra and get a structured school program going, but that hasn't come to anything. So
hopefully with the new chief. And I'll chuck the challenge back out to you two guys. When you're next back on the show, want to see something structured there, some action. Okay, coming up after the break, we're going to ask Jim and Malcolm what's grabbed their attention. Will it be a rant or will it be a rave? You can find out after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. It's time now for our weekly rant and rave. Malcolm, what's got you hot under the collar? I can see the steam rising already.
Well, I prefer to give my rave first, and my rave is from Professor Jacqueline Routh of Massey University, who says New Zealand ranks second only to Iceland in terms of national water quality. And apart from a few hot spots, we can say New Zealand has a top water quality comparison to other developed countries. Now, how positive is that? We don't see that on national news.
No.
We see the Greens moaning about, you know, farmers are ruining the environment and all the rest of it. I think that needs to put us where we are, and I'm tired of being put down about our water quality. we should be celebrating what we've got, but we should be mindful of the other side of it.
Well, I think Jacqueline needs far more of a voice than just that. I mean, you know, that's quite a contrary picture to what we've been getting, isn't it? And so we need to be able to make sure that she gets her say and can back that up with the same sort of, I guess, science that we're hearing from the opposition, or actually better science, because theirs is not always that good, is it?
Now, if you really want to get me grumpy,
oh,
it's the misuse of our brilliant health and safety legislation, which I support. And we had an issue where a floodgate was open and our farm was taking water. So we rang the organisation up, no names mentioned, that looks after the floodgates, and the response come back. However, due to the onset of nightfall and health and safety regulations, we are unable to manually check or alter the gate until tomorrow morning at the earliest. Now, this is absolute nonsense.
Now, let's just get this into perspective, Malcolm, because we're not talking about a little bit of water, are we? We're talking about pretty much a whole chunk of the Waikato River ending up on your farm.
Correct. And you know, look at this. This is nonsense. If the brilliant people we've got in our power authorities that come out and fix our power lines at night would adopt this sort of nonsense, you'd be sitting in the dark all night when the power goes off. You know, we've got essential services all around the country that are conscious of health and safety, yet we've got these clammy bureaucrats that adopt this sort of an attitude to satisfy their own inefficiencies. And I think it's time that we really took a step on this. And
I think that's
enough is enough.
It's outrageous.
I'm outraged.
Good.
I am outraged on your behalf as well, because I want to know now, Malcolm, what you did about it. What have you done about this?
Fortunately for the organisation concerned, I developed laryngitis over the night and was unable to speak for 2 days, which assisted the situation considerably. But bear in mind, I think they're quivering. They know they've offended someone they shouldn't have upset, and the repercussions are to come. This misuse of good legislation. I support the Health and Safety Act, but it's the misuse of it by people for their own purposes that I take considerable umbrage at.
And I mean, I think the other thing that I get from this is that it's been raining for a very long time, and they should not have had to wait for you to contact them about the floodgate getting open and then waiting.
They spent $30,000 automating the gate, so it comes up on the screen and they can control it from the office in the city, right? Apparently that doesn't work, so where'd the 30,000 go? And when I rang the guy up, he said, "Oh, the gate's closed." I said, "No, it's not." And he said, "Oh, so it isn't." So you know, this is the rug, the damp rug that's smothering the whole of the innovative sector within New Zealand. We can't deal with this nonsense. It's the same in the agricultural sector, the same with the transport sector, which Jim might like to comment on. We're just getting buried with needless regulations.
I wait to hear from what happens with the Minister. I look forward to that with interest. Jim, what have you got for us?
I just want to have a very quick rant, and we've had it before, but I can't get past Phil Goff's rantings or ravings about agriculture, his own, and it's got me. I heard him on the radio explaining to a young schoolgirl why we got this capital gains tax. He said, because people who have houses, and I presume that's second houses and batches, and people that have businesses, small businesses, majority of New Zealand, and farmers, create a business and then they sell it and they make lots of money. That's not fair. We need some of that. I cannot believe him. It's not fair, he said, that they are able to sell these things and make money. I ask you, if that's...
Isn't that actually almost communist? Isn't that a communist theory?
Absolutely. Well, I just wonder where he's coming from. I really lost it with Phil over that. That's just, you know, he needs to go back into his... He is past politics. He needs to go back there and get off the national stage and let someone with some talent come through.
Oh, yes, we'd like to see some talent come through. I won't even start raising my eyebrows about that one. Now, I'm going to have a very, very, very short rant on your behalf, Malcolm Lumsden. You may not know, but this man is sitting here in our studio in a lot of pain because he walked on a piece of grass outside a hotel that wasn't fenced and fell 5 feet and hurt his shoulder and his knee. 6 weeks later, he is still waiting for ACC to approve his operation. Occupational health and safety, wake up, because if this was on farm, that hotel would have been sued.
Yeah, that's right.
Another misuse of the occupational health and safety.
Well done, Mandy.
Thank you, Mandy.
All right, ACC, we're after you. Okay, that wraps up our latest edition of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'd like to thank my guests Jim Cotman and Malcolm Lumsden. And thanks to you too for watching. Remember to check out my blog online at country99tv.co.nz. I love hearing from you. I'll catch you next week, and in the meantime, keep on smiling.